the whole immigration process in most European countries is in many ways institutionally racist, and the individual immigration officers are often laden with at least unconscious bias, if not very explicit bias, when they come across non-white people. And unfortunately, often, especially people traveling from the African continent. As a family, we're really well aware of that, and if we're traveling together, regardless of what the lanes may say at an airport, we'll always go to immigration together as a family, and usually with my British or Irish passport on the top of the pile and my children's passports underneath, and then my wife's usually on the bottom, so they know that the Zambian passport holder is traveling with the European people. And we hate the fact that we have to do that, but entering many countries, you just have to play strategically and recognize that because of institutional racism and unconscious bias, that unless you do so, there is more of a chance that you'll be investigated and sometimes denied entry on spurious reasons. So the institutional racism is where you have legislation which means it's increasingly difficult for people of colour to enter certain countries. Now, on paper, it will always look as if they have the same rights as anyone else, but there'll be so many layers within the legislation that means that there can always be an excuse not to issue a visa or to deny entry when you come to enter a country. The most common way that's done is by making the visa fees incredibly high, or the amount of money that you need to be able to produce in order to gain the visa a very significant sum of money. And you'd have to present bank statements for the last few months to show that you have this regular income, or that you have a sponsor who has this sort of income. Now that actually excludes thousands of people from travel who otherwise would legitimately want to travel with good reason to visit family, sometimes for work or to study in parts of Europe or North America. And layered beneath that, you have the issue of unconscious bias and the fact that many immigration officers may not consider themselves to be racist, but when they see a person of colour approaching them at the immigration desk, they've already made certain assumptions before they even see their documentation. And that is usually unconscious. And that is why it's so deeply entrenched in the way that immigration service works, because you have to almost convince them that you are legitimate, because the assumption they're making before they meet you or see your documentation is that you might be trying to enter their territory unlawfully. Whereas when I travel, or anyone else who has white skin, comes from Europe, it's not really an issue. They just assume that you're going to have a strong passport, and thus there's not really going to be any issues to deny you entry to a country. And it's despicable the way that it works. I've talked about apartheid, passport apartheid previously in a video where there are certain passports which are much stronger than others. And again, that's deliberately done. When passports were introduced after the First World War as a travel document, there was no intention that there'd be layers of passports, some which were more powerful than others. It was just a way of ensuring that people could be tracked when they move between countries. But the way it's evolved means that certain passports, usually European, North American, or for other countries which are predominantly white, or countries which are comparatively wealthy, so you find countries like Singapore, Japan, and South Korea will also have very powerful passports. And that means you get all these different layers of passport privilege layered on top of the fact that you've got institutional racism. So it really is a quagmire for people to navigate and to safely be able to travel in the knowledge that they're not likely to be detained at the discretion of an immigration officer. And often it just depends which immigration officer you get. It's down to luck. You may have one who is more open-minded, and then on the other hand, you get the other type who unconscious bias, or sometimes just openly racist. the world is just an unfair, unjust place in so many ways.